My friendship you should have, learned man, but anyone who does not have good language for the series will have my sword to reckon with. But first, guys, let's take a look at the Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. Adventures are never fun while you're having them. What you see and what you hear depends a great deal on where you are standing. It also depends on what sort of person you are. And so, for a time, it looked as if all the adventures were coming to an end, but that was not to be. All shall be done, but it may be harder than you think. One always feels better when one has made up one's mind. If you don't admit to any trouble, you'll find that there aren't many. The trouble about trying to make yourself stupider than you really are is that you very often succeed. I am telling you your story, not theirs. No one is told any story but their own. You doubt your value. Do not run from who you are. Courage, dear heart. No great wisdom can be reached without sacrifice. When things go wrong, you'll find they usually go on getting worse for some time. And when they start going right, they often go on getting better and better. But when your sword breaks, you draw your dagger. Do not cite the deep magic to me. I was there when it was written. A noble friend is the best gift, and a noble enemy is the next best. Once a king in Narnia, always a king in Narnia. But don't go trying to use the same route twice. Things never happen the same way twice. I will not tell you how long or short the way will be, only that it lies across a river. But do not fear that. For I am the great bridge builder, and when I can swim no longer, if I have not reached Aslan's country or shot over the edge of the world in some vast cataract, I shall sink with my nose to the sunrise. Remember that all worlds draw to an end, and that noble death is a treasure which no one is too poor to buy. But do not try to get there. It'll happen when you're not looking for it. I am in your world, but there I have another name. And you must learn to know me by that name. This was the very reason why you were brought to Narnia, that by knowing me here for a little, you may know me better there. Hey, what's up, bookworms and children of Aslan? Mike back again with a Why You Should Read. Haven't done one of these in a while, but today, guys, something that I find very, very near and dear to my heart. This, of course, is The Chronicles of Narnia by Mr. C.S. Lewis, originally released between 1950 and 1956, 7 high fantasy novels that are considered a classic of children's literature. Guys, this series has sold over 100 million copies, has been translated into 47 different languages, and this was my first fantasy series. Yes, I read The Hobbit before this. I didn't read The Lord of the Rings until I got to high school. So in 6th grade, after we finished The Hobbit, I wanted anything else that was like this, and everyone said, you got to check out the Chronicles of Narnia. So this was my first series, I think you would say, in the fantasy genre, and it's always held a special place right here, like I said. So this is a series I kind of wanted to talk about. I'm not sure how much of my audience is interested in this, because it does skew a little younger, but maybe there are some people like me where it is going to kind of rub those nostalgic feelings a little bit to talk about this series. And guys, that begins by talking about what is the series about. Now, Diggory and Polly meet and become friends one cold, wet summer in London, and their lives burst into adventure when Diggory's Uncle Andrew, who thinks he's a magician, sends them hurling into somewhere else. Narnia, where the woods are thick and cold, where talking beasts are called to life. A new world where the adventure begins. Newborn from the lion's song, they encounter the evil sorcerer Jadis before they finally return home. 40 years later, Lucy Penvency finds the secret of the wardrobe in the professor's mysterious old house. At first, her brothers and sister do not believe her when she tells them of the far-off land that she visited named Narnia, but soon Edmund, Peter, and Susan step through the wardrobe themselves, and in Narnia they find a country buried under the evil enchantment of the White Witch. When they meet the lion Aslan, they realize they've been called to a great adventure and bravely join the battle to free Narnia from the witch's sinister spell. Guys, all the way back to 1950. Coming up on that 75th anniversary, guys, this is the Chronicles of Narnia. Now, we got to begin, guys, with this series Well, what makes it good or bad? With the good, because there's a lot of it. I think it is the perfect fantasy gateway for new readers, or young readers, rather. I did a video a while back about where you should start with fantasy if you are a beginner. And depending on your age, I named this as one of my series. And I think the reason is just because it doesn't hold your hand, but it's not overly complex with your lands and your regions and your titles and your lore and your history and your family trees. It's easily grasped. I say this would probably be a nice 6 to 13 would be a great reading age, I think, for this series. That's when I read it. I read it in 6th grade, like I said. And it was perfect timing for me. So I think if you're younger and you're looking to get into things like this, you haven't really done a Harry Potter. You might think you're still just a touch too young for Harry Potter, or Percy Jackson didn't quite click with you. This is going to be the perfect series for you, I think, because it's aged incredibly, incredibly well. Now, I think it sets the structure for how high fantasy works. And that's why it's such a good entry into getting into high fantasy for younger readers or new people that are new to the fantasy genre. I think it helps with that a lot. So while I feel like it is a series that is for younger readers, I don't feel like it's inaccessible for older readers. Look, I read it when I was younger, so I'm sure there's a lot of nostalgia going on here. I'm not even going to pretend that there isn't. However, I will say I reread 4 of them over the last couple years, and I was blown away by just how well it has aged for me. It is still very whimsical. It's very charming. It feels very, very magical, and a lot of that has to do with C.S. Lewis's prose. I feel like his writing style is just fantastic. And I mean it in a way that, like, he's not going to blow you away with his vocabulary, because it is accessible to younger readers. But every other page, you're going to be highlighting some quote that you will just be like, oh my God, that is absolutely beautiful. That's stunning the way that he wrote that. I love that. That's just something that's always going to stick right here. And these books are they're just quote machines. They're fantastic. And I feel like a lot of them could be like motivational posters, because it is an overly positive series. Now, there is a lot of darkness. We'll get into that in a little bit. But like I said, I want you to understand that while it is aimed towards younger audiences, I don't think it's inaccessible. Now, if you've only read like the first Law trilogy and you go back to this, you're going to be like, oh, that's just way below my reading level. And it probably is. But I think there is still room for a little bit of a young adult fiction in our lives sometimes, or even children's literature. I think it's fine to go back to stuff that you might consider like a fairy tale and have a good time with it. I don't think that this is a story that's bound by age. I really don't. And it's kind of one of those stories I think that it will take you back to that feeling of being a kid, and being a kid in a magical world and just letting your imagination run wild. That's what makes this series just so magical. But a big thing with this series is the themes. Themes of love, themes of sacrifice, themes of family. Obviously, loving your fellow man and woman. And then you've got, of course, sacrifice. You've got to be willing to let things go. That's a really, really big theme in this, and I can't get too far into that without giving you a 75-year-old spoiler, like I said. And I just don't do that, guys. I'm not trying to spoil anything for anybody, but there are very big themes of sometimes you love something, you got to let it go, And that does come up quite a bit. And then, of course, family. We're dealing mostly with the Penvencies here, and you're dealing with family. You're going to be dealing with a lot of things where sometimes can seem a little shady, a little backstabby, a little bit of a betrayal. And then, of course, the next big theme is redemption. There is a character in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe that does something absolutely terrible to his family members. And the rest of the series, I feel like, is a great, great redemption arc for that character. So I think these are themes that C.S. Lewis obviously wanted to put into this, all kinds of things like that. In this book, there's a very big, high moral message of basically just don't be a bad person, but don't be afraid to let go of things that you love. And I think that's just part of growing up. Obviously, this is a huge, huge coming of age story. You've got several young characters. That's something, obviously, that's going to be right in my wheelhouse. That's something I'm always just never going to be able to get enough of. But I got to say, guys, if you like animal companions, this series will probably blow you away. Now, Aslan might be the biggest, most famous animal companion of all time. I don't want to say that you call him like a companion, as in like a traveling companion, but he is a presence in this book a lot, and he's an amazing, amazing character. More of a guiding force, I would say. In the earlier books, he's more present, and then he becomes like kind of a guiding force, but he's always present in this series, and every time he's on the page, you're paying attention because he's just such a majestic character, and it's just a great, great presence whenever he's around. But Rippy Cheep might be my most favorite ever. That's basically, imagine like a proper gentleman of a mouse that is a swordsman. Yeah, So he will basically rap battle you in a gentlemanly kind of way, slap you with a glove and challenge you to a duel in the proper gentleman kind of way, but ever loyal and just the faithful animal companion that anyone could want. And I think that Reba Cheap is just one that just imprinted on me at such a young age that anytime I see anything now with a friendly mouse, up to and including like Mickey Mouse, or I just read Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson, and I said Huck made me think of Reba Cheap. That's just something that will always kind of come back to this, because Reba Cheap is one of my favorite animal companions of all time, and he's probably my favorite character in this entire series. I love that character so much. In fact, that's the quote that I opened up this video with. Another great thing about this is that all of the animals talk in Narnia. So you've just expanded your cast tenfold. And all these characters being able to talk gives them more layers. I've said when I was reading Robin Hobb that I think what makes Night Eye such an amazing animal companion above a lot of other ones in high fantasy is because you can hear his thoughts. So with this, all the animals talking is going to be able to make you care about the animals just a little bit more, because they do feel like actual living, breathing characters now, because you have some dialogue. You know what their thoughts are. And that's always going to be a little bit of a cheat code. But I think anytime you've got talking animals, it's a little bit of a cheat code anyway, because we immediately want to love animals, right? And but they aren't all good. That's the thing about that. And that's the thing with this series. Yes, it is aimed at younger readers. But no, C.S. Lewis is not afraid to go dark. There are lots of things in this series. Characters die. Things happen. Bad things happen to these characters. It's some bad stuff. And there's some very high emotional moments that will make you cry. I cried both times I read Voyage of the Dawn Treader. It's such an amazing ending. And to the point where I almost feel like that should have been the ending of the series, almost, but I'll get into that when I talk about the ending here in a second, which I won't spoil, don't worry. But again, he is not afraid to go dark. I think that's just kind of that era where it was okay still to put really, really dark or sinister things into a children's book. I mean, the White Witch is terrifying. There are other villains in the series that I don't want to talk about, but there are lots of dark characters in the story that they might seem a little mustache twirling bad guy. That's going to happen when you have just a traditional good versus evil kind of story like this. It's going to happen. But I do think you get some novels, and according to what order you should read them in, which I'll talk about in a little bit, you get more context to some of those characters, and you can see maybe they aren't just so mustache twirling. Maybe they feel like they have been wronged in some way. So again, I think that the ending of this, it's an ending that would be called controversial today. For me, I would never say that. I think it was very, very bold, especially when you consider the time period that this book came out. It was something that I could think, wow, that might have floored people in 1956, right? It's anything I like. Like I said, it is kind of divisive amongst the fans. Other people didn't really like it because they thought it was leaning towards some themes you might have read somewhere else before. And yes, C.S. Lewis does lean on a lot of things, Irish folklore, Christian values, things like that, which we'll talk about again here in a minute. I'm kind of kicking everything down the road in this discussion here. But I think that he does wear his influences on his sleeve, and I don't think that's a bad thing. So what about the bad guys? Are there some things that I think that maybe you aren't going to like here? I do wonder if it's something you have to experience as a younger reader. I know I said I don't feel like it's inaccessible for older readers, but I do think it's one of those things like, for example, I made this example before, so I'm sorry for hearing it again. When I met my wife, she had never seen The Goonies, and The Goonies was a movie that I loved when I was a kid. And so I just assumed, hey, it's great for any age, because I would still watch it. And I showed it to her for the first time, and we're in our late 20s. And she's like, it's fine, I guess. And I was just like completely blown away. And then I realized, yeah, I think I love it because I did see it when I was much, much younger. I could see seeing it for the first time. Now you might be like, it might be a little too kiddie for me. So you might feel like that with this. I'm not really sure. I've always said that I feel like this and Harry Potter were things that were accessible to older readers because it still had a lot of adult themes and things that we would catch that children wouldn't. And I do feel like those were here. Like I said, you've talked about sacrifice. We talked about redemption, betrayal, some dark, dark things happening in the book. So I do think there are those things there. But if you've only read super serious, dark, high epic fantasy, yeah, it might seem way below your reading level. And that's true. I think that's fine once in a while. Again, it helps me remember why I love this series in the first place, or why I love this genre in the first place. But I can see if that isn't going to work for everyone. It might not be a problem for you. It might be a problem. I'm not really sure. I've heard some complaints about it. Yes, there are heavy Christian overtones in this because C.S. Lewis was a very devout Christian. There are similar parallels to some of the events in the Bible. Like I said, he deals with Irish folklore, all kinds of things. And obviously some Christian themes are going to be in here. I don't think it's the type of book, I think the way my wife put it was, I never once read the Chronicles of Narnia and been like, you know what, I got to go take communion. Just like she said when I read Historic Materials, I didn't say, you know what, I'm atheist now. I never feel like that's the kind of thing. It's never really pushing any kind of message on you, whatever. But C.S. Lewis doesn't hide his influences. So I don't consider that a bad thing. But I have heard that complaint about it a lot. And another one I've heard is it isn't a consistent cast, the entire series. You do switch around. So you do have, the Pevensey kids do show up through most of the series, but there are a few books where it's completely devoid of that, and you do get new characters who kind of expand this land a little bit. So I think he was doing that enough to kind of hold your interest without getting too far away from the main plot, but he does kind of bounce around a little bit. And again, I think if you're an older reader and you enjoy having a little bit of world building, I don't think that's a problem, but I do know, like as a kid, I'm like, where's Lucy? Where's Eustace? That's kind of where I was when I read it the first time. So that's I think that's going to be something that just kind of depends on you. But as for why you should read it, guys, that's why you're here, right? I think this is a staple of classic fantasy that everyone should read. It is one of the foundations. There's a reason that this story has endured for almost 75 years now. I think that this series was the Harry Potter of its time. And what I mean by that is that it is a story that has been passed down a couple of generations. Parents read it to their kids, and then their kids passed it down to their kids, and so on forth. And it's something that kind of continued to be happening until I feel like Harry Potter was the first one that kind of like knocked that off of its perch. Now, I'm not saying that this is like the Lord of the Rings. I'm saying that isn't like this is the one that was accessible to younger readers. This was the Harry Potter for the 50 years that it dominated, and that's why it sold over 100 million copies. It's been translated so many different languages because so many people have passed this down through the generations. Now, I'm not saying that Harry Potter killed it. I'm just trying to give you some context of how big this series was with younger audiences when it came out, and I think that it just endured for that reason. And it's low commitment, guys. This whole series is in this book. All 7 of them are right here. This whole series is shorter than a Brandon Sanderson Stormlight Archive book, so it's low commitment, I think. It's very easy to read. You're never going to feel like there's anything bogged down. You're never going to feel like it's slow. Like I said, you might get into some of those, a couple of those books and feel like, hey, I feel like you're getting away from the main plot. But again, that just gives you more of a taste of Narnia and what it's like and things like that. But I love that it teaches young readers good moral values. That's something that I feel like does get undersold a little bit. It's good and evil. Obviously, that's the big one. But, I think blood is thicker than water. Always ride or die with family over what someone else is telling you. Holding yourself accountable. You're going to make mistakes. You know what? Don't be afraid to pay for them. Admit it. Don't point the finger at someone else. Stand up for yourself and say, you know what? I messed up, and I'm going to prove myself to you and earn your trust again. That's a very, very important message here. And in the end, like I said, just doing the right thing. Being a decent human being, always making the right choice. That's something I think is very, very, it's lost on a lot of modern fantasy audiences, that love, grimdark. Because I love that stuff too. But, it's good, I think, for younger readers to read stuff like this and learn, hey, how about some empathy? Let's show some empathy for our fellow man and woman there. Let's just see why we are going to just, love each other as opposed to hate each other. He does a very great job at spreading those messages, I do think. So as for my final thoughts, guys, look, this is a series that will always be special to me, like I said, because it was my first. You never forget your first, right? So I do count this as my first series since I didn't even know that Lord of the Rings was the sequel to The Hobbit until I got to high school. That's how sheltered I was. But I think it was instrumental in shaping my love for the fantasy genre. It really is. That's why to this day, I will make comparisons of, a family to the Pevensey family because of this series, or why I still am like, hey, I got to watch this Shadow and Bone show because it's got Prince Caspian on it. That was Ben Barnes, by the way, in case you didn't know. It's a shame what Disney did to those adaptations. They started really strong. And Netflix has the rights to this now. They're doing nothing with it. I don't know. That's a different conversation. I think that the last thing I'll say is, the reading order for this is highly debated. Now, I recall reading something from C.S. Lewis himself. I might be wrong. I didn't know the guy. But I remember reading something about he said that he wanted people to read it. After he was done writing it, he wanted it to be read in chronological order, not publishing order. This version that I have has it in chronological order. Now, what that means is just you read Magician's Nephew first, Lion the Wardrobe second, The Horse and His Boy third, and then publication order the rest of the way. That's the only difference. I recommend doing it that way because reading Magician's Nephew first, you get so much more context to the wardrobe. You know about the streetlight, you know about Aslan, and you know about the White Witch. These things make the impact in Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe and the ending of The Voyage of the Dawn Treader so much more impactful if you read that first and not sixth. So that's the way that I recommend doing it. I know there are people that are publication order no matter what, and I get that. I respect that. But I think the reason that this has been reprinted these days in that order that C.S. Lewis recommended is definitely the way that I would consider canon. It's the best way to do it. So if you think it's under your reading level, I understand. If you have young kids like I do, I think maybe try picking it up and reading it with them. I think maybe you'll enjoy it. Like, I know Percy Jackson is below my reading level, and it's probably nothing I'd be reading on my own. But reading it with my kid has been a wonderful experience, and I've wanted to read this with my kid, but we decided to do Percy Jackson instead, so he decided to pick up the movies instead. But you know what? There's always still time. He's only 10 years old. I still got time, I think, to get in there. But guys, that is the Chronicles of Narnia, a series that I absolutely adore. I love it to pieces, and I think that you guys will too. If you've watched this far, thank you so much. Like I said, I know that this probably isn't the target demographic for my audience, but I love to talk about the things that influenced me as well as, millions and billions of other people, and that is the Chronicles of Narnia, an amazing story that has stood the test of time, and I don't believe it's going anywhere anytime soon. So guys, the Chronicles of Narnia, C.S. Lewis, have you read it? What did you think? Drop in the comments and let me know. Would you be interested in picking up for the first time as an adult? I highly encourage you to do so. I encourage you to read it with your kids. Pass it down to future generations. That's always what I preach here. So drop in the comments. Let me know, guys, know what you think, and I will talk to you there.